Sri Lanka is an island shaped by its tropical coasts, misted highlands, dense forests, and open plains set within a single curved shoreline. During its 2 monsoon seasons, winds circle the island, feeding rivers that cut deep channels from the central hills to the sea. Fishing harbors, rail lines, and hillside towns follow these routes, tying together low country lagoons, tea estates, and ancient capitals. Across this majestic island country, layered histories sit within walking distance of one another. Rock-cut temples rise above paddy fields, colonial forts anchor busy ports, and stupas tower over modern streets lined with markets and buses. Kings, traders, and monks once moved along the same paths that now carry commuters and travelers, leaving stone reservoirs, carved shrines, and palace foundations that still guide how people live and gather. The abundant, verdant world of Sri Lanka frames nearly every site here. Elephants and deer move through dry forests in the northeast and central plains, while rainforests cling to the slopes of the southwest hills. Tea gardens cling to rolling ridgelines in tight green rows, and palm-fringed beaches ring bays, where fishing boats and dive skiffs share the water. Coral reefs, mangroves, and wetlands border towns and villages, adding to the many beautiful things to see here. Watch the video until the end to to see a historic landmark of radical engineering and beauty so iconic you won't want to miss it. This is a place where the outdoors and history come together to create an amazing world. Welcome to Sri Lanka. Colombo. Colombo extends along Sri Lanka's western shore, its streets running between the Indian Ocean and a patchwork of lakes, canals, and low-rise neighborhoods. Glass towers, offices, and apartment blocks rise beside older warehouses and tiled roof houses, while port cranes and breakwaters shape the edge of the water. Beneath this modern surface lies an impressive history of coastal trade. Long before it became the island's commercial capital, this stretch of shoreline served as a natural anchorage for regional merchants moving spices, textiles, and grain. Portuguese, Dutch, and British powers each fortified and rebuilt parts of the waterfront, leaving grids of streets, churches, and civic buildings that still frame today's business districts. Mosques, temples, and churches gather close together in older quarters, showing how trading communities layered their own traditions into the same compact space and somehow made it work. Colombo is now Sri Lanka's main gateway and hub. Containers move through the harbor toward shipping lanes that cross the Indian Ocean, while railways and highways radiate inland toward ancient cities, hill country towns, and southern beaches. Office workers, vendors, and travelers share the same stations and junctions, moving between seaside promenades, government precincts, markets, and new commercial complexes. Colombo brings together oceanfront promenades, historic port streets, and a growing modern skyline, making it an ideal first stop for experiencing Sri Lanka's culture. gale. Salt on the air before anything else, then the line of the ramparts and the long curve of the water beyond them. Inside the old fort, streets run in a tight grid between low houses, cafes, galleries, and warehouses, their verandas and shutters facing lanes that were once laid out for soldiers and traders. On the edges, the walls turn straight toward the sea, cut by lookouts, bastions, and a lighthouse that guide the eye back and forth between stone and horizon. Step outside those walls and the view changes quickly. Traffic circles the cricket ground, buses pull in and out, and modern shop fronts face the main road toward the south coast. The train line hugs the shore, with tracks only a short walk from the fort gates, so long-distance travelers, commuters, and school kids all pass the same stretch of ocean on their way in and out of town. The older quarters inside feel compact enough to cross on foot in an afternoon, but the details reward a slower pass. Street names that recall Dutch and British rule, churches and temples sharing the same blocks, merchants working in buildings that have shifted from warehouses to guest houses and back again over the decades. Evening draws more people onto the ramparts, families, couples, vendors, all using the walls as a broad promenade above the rocks. Beyond the fort itself, small lanes lead toward residential areas, workshops, and bus stands where most daily routines unfold away from the sea breeze. That contrast between enclosed streets and open ocean, between layered architecture and contemporary port traffic, gives Galle its particular weight in any journey around Sri Lanka. Part coastal stronghold, part working town, always tied to ships, monsoon winds, and the curve of the bay. Kandy. Kandy is a hill country city in central Sri Lanka, arranged around an artificial lake and ringed by steep hills in the island's interior. Morning air here runs cooler than the coast, with mist sliding between ridgelines while traffic already circles the water and pushes into narrow side streets. Low shops, old tiled roofs, and concrete apartment blocks climb the slopes together, cut by stairways, short alleys, and the occasional sudden view down to the lake surface. Under that everyday grid lies the memory of a former royal capital and a long link to Buddhist ritual on the island. Temple courtyards, shrines, and old administrative compounds cluster near the lakefront, so office workers, students, and pilgrims all pass through the same tight corridors and shaded verandas. Ceremonial processions, drum patterns, and seasonal festivals still shape the calendar here, tying religious life directly to the streets and water. Roads and rail lines fold in from Colombo, and then climb away again toward tea country, making Kandy a natural hinge between lowland heat and the deeper highlands beyond. For a traveler tracing the island by land, the route often bends here, away from coastal highways toward mountain curves and slower rail lines. Anuradhapura. This is an ancient royal capital and present-day regional city in Sri Lanka's dry zone, spread across flat plains threaded with man-made lakes, canals, and low scrub. Instead of a tight downtown, it stretches over a wide area of archaeological zones, villages, and modern streets, with earthen embankments and water reservoirs tying the landscape together. Large white domes and brick terraces rise above the trees, while clusters of stone pillars hint at the scale of former monasteries and assembly halls that once anchored Sinhala kingdoms here for many centuries. Pilgrims arrive by bus and bicycle, moving between shrines, processional paths, and bathing ponds. So devotional routes and everyday commutes fold into one another across the same sandy ground. Away from the core ruins, the present-day town runs on slower. Irrigated fields close to the tanks, housing rows near junctions, repair shops, and tea stalls along the main roads. For a traveler, the city reads as a long, low spread of faith sites, engineered water systems, and working farmland, with no hard line between the archaeological map and the living town around it. Mirissa. A small coastal town on Sri Lanka's southern shore, built along a curved bay where the main highway and railway pass only a short distance inland. Development follows that line closely. Guest houses, cafes, and small hotels cluster along the road behind the sand, serving the many visitors to this breathtaking getaway. Economically, Mirissa turns on two main engines, coastal tourism and nearshore fisheries, which share limited shoreline for moorings and beach-facing businesses. Functions as a compact node on the South Coast corridor, with frequent buses and trains making it a standard stop between larger urban hubs and other resort areas. In the hills and headlands just beyond the town, modern villas and small resorts experiment with concrete, glass, courtyards, and open plans oriented towards sea and slope, echoing broader Sri Lankan architectural practice that ties buildings closely to terrain and climate. Sigiriya. In Sri Lanka's north-central plains, there are ruins of a small town and ancient complex perched high atop a mountainous base. This is the most photographed and most enchanting landmark in the entire country. Sigiriya, where a single massive stone column and its surrounding planned landscape suddenly interrupt low forest and cultivated fields. Engineers reshaped both rock and ground here, cutting moats, embankments, and stepped terraces. Laying out water channels and axial paths, and tying elevated platforms into a geometric plan that still reads clearly in the ruins. Archaeological work traces use from early shelters and forest monasteries through a brief phase as a fortified royal residence. Before the area reverted to religious use and later fell quiet until modern surveys and conservation began. What remains is a framework. Foundations, carved stairways, painted rock faces, and formal hydraulic layouts that show how architecture, irrigation, and cliff surfaces were treated as parts of one designed environment. Around this core, present-day Sigiriya functions as a compact base town. Its guest houses, small eating places, and bike rentals strung along sandy roads that connect to farm plots and other cultural triangle sites. Road networks link it to larger centers such as Dambulla and Kandy, so buses, hired vans, and tour vehicles cycle through daily, using the town as a practical hinge for moving between heritage zones across the interior. From forested hills to sunlit coasts, Sri Lanka gathers nature and heritage into one remarkable land. So much remains to discover. So, until next time, enjoy every step of the journey.